Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive, honestly, kind of frustrating paradox happening in the business world right now. Have you noticed how AI pilots succeed brilliantly, but when it comes time for enterprise deployments, they almost inevitably fail to scale? If you've been working with artificial intelligence in any corporate capacity, you have definitely felt the friction of this exact problem. Well, today we are going to unpack exactly why that happens, and more importantly, how to fix it. Let's get into it. Okay, so picture this. A situation nearly every enterprise leader is currently pulling their hair out over. You ran a pilot, right? Maybe a customer service chatbot or a shiny new supply chain predictive model. And it was a massive success. The metrics looked fantastic, the executive board enthusiastically gave you the green light to roll it out company-wide, and then bam, everything starts breaking. Momentum just completely stalls. It's a baffling experience, but I promise you, it is incredibly common. And that brings us to an uncomfortable truth we all really need to confront. The AI isn't failing. Your organization is. I know, ouch, right? But this is the crucial conversation missing in most boardrooms right now. We get so completely hypnotized by the magic of the technology itself that we miss a very stark reality. Scaling issues are rarely a technology problem. They're actually a fundamental organizational design problem. Running a small contained pilot and running a scaled enterprise-wide deployment require two entirely different sets of organizational muscles. To help you build those muscles and stop experimenting so you can start scaling, here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll cover the pilot illusion. Then, the hidden traps of scaling. After that, strategy versus operating model. Next, building AI infrastructure. And finally, the compliance clock. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the pilot illusion engineered for success. Think back to your pilot for a second. It succeeded because, whether you meant to or not, you engineered the exact perfect conditions for it to succeed. You cherry-picked the best use case, you used the absolute cleanest data available, and you assigned your most motivated team to it. You gave them a tight, 90-day window to solve one highly specific problem. Of course it worked. It's like a lab experiment. But here's the catch. A pilot merely proves technical feasibility under curated laboratory conditions. It totally fails to prove your organization's readiness for the unpredictable reality of scaling. Because out in the real world, data is messy, business conditions are constantly evolving, and ownership is completely fragmented. Moving right along to Section 2, the hidden traps of scaling, 3 failure modes. When you step out of that controlled pilot environment, 3 very specific traps are waiting for you. The first trap? Ownership ambiguity. In a pilot, you have a single team who owns everything, top to bottom. But at scale, you're crossing multiple departments and relying on a super complex vendor ecosystem. So when the AI inevitably spits out an incorrect result, and it will, the problem falls right into a gap between teams. Nobody knows whose problem it actually is, there's absolutely no clear escalation path, and the failure just kind of sits there, quietly polluting all your downstream processes. Then we have the second trap, data drift. Now this one is sneaky. Pilots run on static, beautifully curated data. It's essentially like driving a sports car on a freshly paved, closed test track. But production, that runs on the full, messy reality of your organization. Over time, business conditions shift, and those AI models quietly degrade. Accuracy just slips away. And without a proper monitoring framework in place, you remain completely unaware of this drift until a massive downstream failure suddenly blows up in your face. And the third trap is organizational resistance. Pilots naturally attract those eager early adopters, the tech enthusiasts. Scaling, on the other hand, reaches everybody else. It hits the people whose everyday workflows are suddenly turned upside down, or whose years of professional judgment are suddenly being second-guessed by an algorithm. You can imagine the pushback. Overcoming this requires structured change management programs and sustained leadership investment. An informal kickoff email just isn't going to cut it here. Let's look at Section 3, Strategy versus Operating Model, Minding the Gap. This really gets to the heart of what's missing in most enterprises today. Look, almost every company out there has a visionary AI strategy, but very, very few have built the actual AI operating model needed to run it. A strategy is great. It describes where you want to go and focuses heavily on innovation. Everyone has one, but an operating model, that describes how you actually run the thing day to day. It focuses purely on operations and accountability. And the hard truth is, you simply cannot scale on strategy alone. You need the operational engine to actually drive the car. Which brings us to Section 4, Building AI Infrastructure, the blueprint. So what does this engine look like? Your AI operating model absolutely must have these 3 core components. First, a clear accountability structure. Every single AI system in production needs a named individual owner, not a vague committee, a specific human being with the authority to act, alongside a documented risk tier. Second, you need a measurement framework. Are you actually producing better decisions than the human baseline? If you don't have outcome metrics, you are completely flying blind. And third, governance protocols. You need documented escalation paths and explicit authority on exactly who gets to hit the kill switch. And you need this figured out way before the first incident happens, not while you're panicking during a crisis. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, the compliance clock, looming deadlines. Setting all this up isn't just some nice-to-have best practice anymore. With major frameworks like the EU AI Act, the NIST Risk Management Framework, and ISO 42001 rolling out, a very strict compliance clock is now ticking down for organizations in every sector. The companies that are going to dominate over the next 3 years aren't necessarily the ones with the flashiest, most sophisticated models. They're going to be the ones that actually took the time to build the operating model to run AI reliably and in full compliance. Bottom line, if you run AI, you absolutely must proactively govern it. You cannot outsource this responsibility. You can't just point to your software vendor's contracts, and you can't just toss it over the fence to the IT department. That responsibility lives entirely in your operating model. It requires the organizational discipline to treat AI as permanent, critical infrastructure, rather than just treating it like some fun, temporary innovation experiment. So, before you rush off to try and scale another use case, I want you to take a hard look at your organization and ask yourself, do you actually have an AI operating model in place, or are you just running a permanent innovation experiment? Seriously, are you governing your AI, or is it governing you? It is time to build that infrastructure. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.